Hello and welcome, Capital H listeners. I'm Kyle Forrest, your host and Deloitte's Future of HR leader. Today's episode explores one of the biggest leadership questions of 2026. How do we get humans and machines working better together? Welcome Darren Gest, a principal within our human capital practice, Amy Kickham, Chief Human Resource Officer at Southern Glazers, and Steve Bronson, Chief Information Officer at Southern Glazers. Now let's dive into this conversation.
All right. Well, welcome everyone. We are live from the Deloitte boardroom at Unleash 2026. And I'm joined by two amazing executives from Southern Glazers Wine and Spirits. And I'll allow you both to introduce yourself. Amy, if I could start with you, and then we'll hand it over to Steve.
My name is Amy Kickham. I'm the Chief Human Resource Officer at Southern Glazers Wine and Spirits. I am blessed to be here today with my coworker and colleague, Steve Bronson, and as well with you, Darren, and the Deloitte team. So thank you for having us.
Thank you for being here.
A pleasure.
Steve.
And I'm Steve Bronson, Chief Information and Technology Officer at Southern Glazers Wine and Spirits. And I'm thrilled to be here with my partner in crime from our HR team, Amy, and Darren, you as well. So thanks for having me as well.
It's wonderful to have you both here. So we're going to get into a couple of really interesting topics. So as you all know, Unleash 2026, we're focused on quite a few relevant and topical areas. So the HR and IT partnership, as we all know, it's critical to solving today's challenges. And given the world where you both come from, I think it's important to paint a backdrop of those challenges and what's sort of the call to action. So from my lens, as we think about the consumer industry, the pressures are compounding, right? Global consumption is shifting, of course. We have a rise in value-seeking behaviors. And ultimately, there's a significant push for growth, but cost and where that sort of funding is going to come from is not obvious. And so innovation becomes a pretty key differentiator in the market in terms of competing. And I think that's what we're going to dive into today. So Deloitte frames this as humans times machines, where real AI value comes from scaling the human edge. I think this is the innovation space that we're going to play with a bit today. 7 in 10 leaders prioritizing speed and agility over the next 3 years. That's the stat that we're going to rely on. And so the focus becomes clear. Define what humans must lead, what machines must amplify, and how to design and govern the handoff so speed never compromises trust. And so with that as a backdrop, maybe we get into some of the 2026 shifts from our Human Capital Trends report, and I'll use some of those findings, Amy and Steve, to prompt a few discussion questions. So one of the key themes in 2026 is getting human and machine relationships right to maximize the value of humans and machines working together. So AI value realization is not a technology problem. It's what we view as it's really a work design problem. And I like the saying of AI is an amplifier, not an equalizer. So if the processes and the roles and the talent is great, then AI will amplify that. If the work design and all these sort of HR considerations is not, then AI will amplify that as well. So not doing AI for AI's sake. So Amy, maybe I'll ask you the first question here. Where are you seeing the biggest shift in that kind of human edge? So as I think about judgment, empathy, ingenuity, and what are your views on where humans have to lead in that equation?
Yeah, I think one of the words you didn't use, one of the adjectives you didn't say is agility. And in today's environment, specifically when you talk about integrating AI in today's workforce, regardless of the business or industry you're in, you've got to have agility, right? You have to be able to learn on the flow, learn on the go. You need the ability to shift focus quickly. To your point, pace is more important now than it ever has been. Our business and industry is changing at a faster pace than I've seen in my 14 years in the business. And we have to stay firm in the fact that leaders need to be agile. But with that agility comes empathy, right? I can't lead with a firm, this is what we're going to do, because that doesn't explain agility or empathy. Put yourself in that employee's shoes. I'm learning something new. I'm doing something new while I'm also trying to keep up the pace of the business. I need to be able to learn quickly, develop quickly, and do so, again, with pace. So from my perspective, our leaders need to be agile and they need to lead with empathy.
Yeah, it's really well said. Steve, from the CIO seat, from your lens, what's the biggest shift changing how work gets done? And I think uniquely, where do you need HR most at this stage?
Yeah, I think the biggest shift is that AI has moved from being a productivity tool to become a participant in the work. Think more like colleague than calculator. It's no longer just automating tasks, it's shaping decisions, influencing prioritization, and accelerating human judgment. That fundamentally changes how work's designed and how accountability works inside an organization. And I think back to where I need HR the most, it's at the human-machine handoff. So HR is essential in redesigning roles, clarifying decision ownership, building the skills and confidence people need to supervise, challenge, lead, be agile, and ultimately remain accountable for AI-assisted work. Technology can enable intelligence at scale, but HR makes sure that intelligence becomes a trusted capability rather than a risk that remains unmanaged.
Yeah, great points. And the point about trust, we'll pull that thread a little bit later in the interview, but really insightful. And if the shift is real, and it sounds like we all agree and recognize it, the next question is around execution. So how do we actually redesign work so humans and machines create measurable value beyond pilots? I think as we look at the market, a lot of organizations, and of course it's a bell curve, but a lot of the market is really in that pilot mode, use case mode, and starting to explore, well, what does this really mean at scale? And so organizations leading on intentional design and human and AI interaction are about 2.5 times more likely to report better financial results and 2 times as likely to say that they provide meaningful work. And so this is a question, maybe Steve, I'll start with you this time. As we're scaling these strategies, and again, moving from pilot to enterprise-wide, where do the transformations stall? And what's the most common execution gap when moving from pilots to scaled human and machine ways of working?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. In my experience, any type of transformation, AI or other, they stall when organizations try to scale the technology faster than they scale clarity for the humans that are leveraging the technology. I think pilots work because they're super controlled and in an environment with teams that are very motivated and excited to be part of something brand new. And at scale, the most common execution gap is unclear ownership. So who owns the outcome? Who intervenes when something, particularly when AI is wrong? Who's accountable for decisions? And without that, leaders slow things down. Employers, they just route around in systems. Trust erodes. Scaling technology isn't the challenge. It's an operating model challenge. And that's what we have to focus on, I think.
Yeah.
When you think about trust, because trust is super important when you're moving from anything, specifically in this question, from a pilot to scalable, trust is a human emotion, right? A machine can't say, oh my gosh, I trust Amy today. She's super cool. Although I am.
Yeah.
The machine may
I was
not
going to say, the machine may say that if it knows you.
That's right. That's right. But the point is that the trust is an emotion, right? So I can say, I trust Steve because I know I've used my judgment. I've used all of those emotional aspects that I own to say, I trust Steve, right? And I think that's one of the things we talk about. I can put a lot of trust in a pilot because I can control it. I know it. I've set parameters. I have my key metrics. But when you go to scale it, it's about the business. It's not about us or trying to do what's right. Is the business ready to accept it? Have we set the business up for success? And then the third and final part is, does the business trust us to ensure that the pilot is going to go from pilot to scalable? And if you don't have those 3 things, it's not going to work.
Yeah, I mean, trust has come up in every conversation that we've had about scaling AI? It doesn't come up maybe as much when we're thinking about some of the use cases,
Right.
but any sort of broader enterprise play, trust has really been a theme. I think it's super insightful.
I think the other piece too is like when you say, okay, here's something really cool. I'm going to give you this new tool for your job. The first human emotion people are going to say is like, not going to happen, right?
Yeah.
I don't trust this tool. It's a computer, right? And then you get so many different generational judgments on what technology is going to do for me. And the key part is the trust isn't in the technology. The trust isn't in the AI machine or bot. The trust is in my leadership that they're giving me this tool to ensure that I'm successful. When you talk to your top talent in your organization and you say to them, how can I make things better for you? Give me more time and give me more resources is what they're going to say. But they have to trust you that you're going to do the right things by giving them those tools to make sure that they have more time and therefore more resources.
Yeah. So given the importance of this one, and I'll just cite a trend or a stat from our trends report. So we found that 61% of leaders say trustworthy workforce data matters, and only 5% report strong progress. So if trust is the constraint, our view is that governance is what keeps speed and safety aligned, sort of that glue, especially at the human machine level and with those handoffs. So, and Amy, I think you were sort of getting to this, but tactically, what guardrails actually work in progress to make humans and machines effective together without slowing everything down?
Again, when you're speaking just about the AI technology pieces of it, there has to be guardrails in place because otherwise we'll be like a bouncy ball, right? Just like when we were kids, you throw the bouncy ball off the wall and it hits 15 walls before you catch it again, right? You have to put guardrails in place so that we all know that we're driving towards the same end result. Those guardrails can look like metrics. Those guardrails can come in the form of new expectations, job mapping, career mapping. It could also just simply look like process mapping, right? So if we all understand what we are asking this technology to do, we're all on the same page, then the governance comes easy. Otherwise, if you don't have that process mapping in place or you don't have that fill in the blank to provide your organization and your team with structure, then the guardrails just don't exist. You've got to set those clear expectations. Like, what do you want this pilot to achieve? My friend at work has this great statement. He always asks me this question, Amy, what problem are you trying to solve? And can that technology help you solve that problem? And have you put the guardrails in place to support it?
Steve, yesterday during the CHRO summit, when you and Amy were on the panel, you mentioned the term human in the loop. So where do you put the human in the loop? What triggers that override? And just how do you sort of think about that process and those guardrails?
Yeah, I think for us, we're moving beyond the idea of human in the loop to what my data and analytics and AI leader is deemed AI in the loop. Humans lead by default, and AI is brought into the workflow deliberately. It's really purposeful. It has to earn responsibility like an employee would. And humans have to remain accountable for the outcomes at all times. So overrides or escalations, they're triggered when the decisions cross some of these thresholds that we put in place.
Yeah.
So when AI confidence exceeds its authorization, which now today in our age, that's what's happening. Or when there's context or value-based judgments that are required, this is when we have to make sure that the humans are driving. And that's why when we have AI in the loop, it's purposeful that we're bringing AI in to solve our most valuable problems. We're bringing AI in to the human workflow, the human element of our business. And so the other key is that when we do this, we have to define these triggers and design them up front. And we can't discover them just after something goes wrong. And so this approach allows us to go faster with some confidence rather than go fast and then introduce a ton of risk into the process. So again, this is that notion of AI in the loop rather than human in the loop.
Yeah, it's simple, but it's a monumental shift in perspective. And it has so many cultural implications and workforce design implications. And maybe we go there. So culture and readiness, you said it really well, Steve. It's being reshaped by AI. And many organizations are still not really evaluating AI's impact on people. So in our research, again, back to the trends report, 42% of workers say that their organization is not doing that today. So much more of a tech-centric approach, not really focused on the people and sort of organizational or cultural impact. So let's talk about redesigning for real human and machine collaboration. And Steve, I'll go back to you. So what work are you redesigning first to improve human and machine collaboration? And what new skills matter most at that handoff?
Yeah, I think this is where leveraging the partnership that Amy and I have created and our teams is so important, right? We'll be redesigning the decision-heavy workloads first and workflows first.
Yeah.
I think places where speed, judgment, and scale are going to matter the most in the future for us is where we're going to focus. I think the most important skill shift is that our individual contributors now have to think like managers because they're managing the AI outputs. Again, back to this notion of AI as a colleague as opposed to a calculator, teaching individual contributors on how to lead and not, there's an element that is very different than leading humans when you're leading AI. Setting expectations, they have to review the work critically, whereas opposed to they might be reviewing their own work, they have to review the AI's work. They have to intervene and know when it makes sense to intervene, and then they have to stay accountable for the results. I don't think this is about teaching how to prompt. I think it's about teaching judgment, supervision, and ownership. That skill shift is where I think the long-term value is going to show up for us in the future.
Amy, what are your thoughts as you're building readiness at scale? How do you think about leaders, managers, frontline, and the adoption that's going to take so that this is not just a tool rollout, but it's really a way of designing work, and these are the new rituals of Southern Glazers?
Yeah. It's something that has to be integrated to the daily life, right? So we have to understand, to Steve's point, AI is now a coworker, a colleague, right? How do I interact with that? You've heard the saying many times, like, I would run through hot coals for Steve. He's the greatest leader I've ever had, right? AI is not going to run through hot coals for you. So how do you ensure that you are making the right leadership decisions, that you're equipped and you're scaled to provide those guardrails to not only humans, but to the AI pieces too as well? There has to be, we talked about it earlier, it has to be agility. I have to be very agile in my leadership. Teaching agility is one thing, being agile is another thing. So when we look at our learning and development platforms, we've got to ensure that technology is part of our learning and development platform. So that way the end user or the leader, the person that's partnering with the machine technology, understands that they know that from the get-go, right? Now, there's the other aspects of it too. When you talk about scale for readiness is business. Like we haven't really talked about this, but the business owns this in the end result, right? We are a wholesaler of wine, spirits, and many other things too as well. Wine and spirits in our name. But at the end of the day, are you a distributor or are you a sales, right? It's the chicken or the egg. You can't do one without the other. So has the business bought into this readiness, right? Is our distribution team ready to automate? Is our sales team ready to accept a new e-commerce platform and upgrades in the tools and technology? The change management is one thing we don't ever talk about with this that is absolutely key. If your organization is not ready, then don't do it because it will kill your culture.
Yeah.
Everybody always says, how do you know your culture is ready? And I know when my culture is ready. I have a pulse on the business. I have a pulse on what our employees are thinking. We do engagement surveys. We understand concerns. All you have to do is go look at the local news or a news article to tell you that people are concerned. How do you meet that in the middle and make sure that you squash those concerns from the beginning? Your change management plan is absolutely key in all of this.
Yeah, and I love the push for an ownership mindset. Hugely important. And then even tactically, you mentioned L&D, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is leadership will take us as far as it will. Culture will take us as far as it will. And a little bit of hand-to-hand combat with L&D and training programming and making sure that our workforce has the resources that it needs, along with the leadership, along with the culture surrounding it, to thrive.
Technology is just one piece of my toolkit, right? My toolkit's, if I'm going to be a really strong leader, my toolkit has to be deep.
Yeah.
Technology is just one piece of that toolkit. Do I have the leadership skills? Do I have leadership capabilities? Do I have an area and opportunity for growth and development? Many other things we could go on and on with that list, but we just have to remember that the toolkit is a complete toolkit and technology is a piece of it. And then we have to embrace it. Great things can happen. That's the cool part. Is like, if you just take a minute and pause and say to yourself, 14 years ago when I started with this company, We didn't have an applicant tracking system. We didn't have a state-of-the-art benefit platform. All of that came with technology, with change, with absorbing what's next. It's the same thing. We're just asking you to take a minute, acknowledge it, accept it, go through your change curve, your 7 stages of grieving, and then we'll get there. But we have to do it together. And before Steve started, 8 months, 9, oh my gosh, 10 months ago?
Yeah,
10 months ago?
roughly.
Nobody owned AI.
Yeah.
We all looked at each other and said, this is great stuff. This is really cool. And when Steve stepped in and he's like, I gotcha, right? So you talk about ownership, and then you talk about what's next, and then you talk about rollout. But he doesn't just own it, he supports it because the business owns it, right? He's just a supporting tool and all that. And if the business isn't ready, then don't do it because it won't go over well.
Well, and that's a great point, Amy, because the way we think about it is a lot of technologists and CIOs and peers in the industry that I talk to, there's this element of, there's some fear associated with this, the human fear of leveraging these new tools. But there's also the fear that AI is going to do things that we don't want it to do. And there's cyber challenges and all kinds of technical challenges around it. And for us, thinking about it as the stewards of the business is so critical. And we need to think about governance like a steering wheel as opposed to a brake.
Yes.
And that's the balance.
Yeah.
But the human element, again, that's why we talk about AI in the loop and not humans in the loop, because humans are the loop.
Yeah.
So that's critical.
The whole concept of AI is emotional. Let's just be real here for a second, right? It's like when you say to somebody, we're going to learn about AI, or we're going to whatever, fill in the blank policy is going to change because of AI. I went to my talent acquisition team a year ago and I said to them, don't be afraid, embrace and learn. What I want you to do is I want you to go out and you tell me what AI can do to help your job. How can you make your job easier? How can you streamline it? How can you be more efficient with the number of requisitions that we have open by embracing AI? And I challenge them, go and then teach me, like tell me how this is going to simplify, or how this is going to elevate your job, or how this is going to provide more time to focus on bringing that top talent into the organization, because without top talent in your organization, you're not an organization. So how do we do that? You tell me. We'll embrace it together.
Yeah, it's well said. And you mentioned Steve came into the organization about 10 months ago, and I can't stress enough the importance of having a leader own the sort of enterprise strategy, but also create the partnerships within the business to build it together. We've seen a lot of organizations try and fail because of that sort of siloed approach. I think what's good for one function may not be right for the next function.
Right.
And Amy, I love the push for an environment of getting your hands dirty and getting some hands-on experience and really advancing the needle. And I think doing it in the context of a broader strategy that, in this case, Steve, you own, it provides the guardrails, the direction, and the playing field. And then the partnerships ultimately create the space to play, the commonalities, and then also the recognition of the nuances. So I think the last 10 months versus now, it's really excited to see what you all are going to do.
Yeah, and we're just starting, right? We're just scratching the surface of where we can go. And I think our Chief Strategy and Growth Officer, David Chaplin, he's a huge supporter and has already started to lead the team down this path from an AI perspective. We look at it as we're the stewards of the overall AI strategy and making sure, to Amy's point, that we're partnered with all of our business partners, making sure that we're the steering wheel and not the brake, and making sure that wherever there's valuable problems to solve in our business, that we're able to react quickly, partner with those business teams on solving their most important problems, and then getting out of the way, but within guardrails. And I think without that, we may end up going a lot slower than we want. So that's really the intent.
Yeah. All right, well, we're going to jump into the next segment that we're calling the lightning round. So in the lightning round, I'm going to ask each of you one question and maybe just share your quick thoughts on the answer, and we'll just go down the line here. So, Amy, 190-day move to improve your human and machine system at Southern Glazers.
Patience, We have to move at pace, but at the same time, you have to have the patience to continue to learn. The AI technology is going to help, but you have to learn the system and the tools too that you have in place. Is it working? And I think we'll talk about metrics in a second.
Yeah, great. Steve, what do you think in the next 90 days? What's the most important move?
Yeah, I think succinctly, just explicitly define where AI is allowed to decide and where it's not. I think the more ambiguity, you're going to end up destroying trust faster than any technical issue could.
Great. All right, question 2. And Amy, you alluded to it. What is one metric that best signals progress in scaling the human edge?
Yesterday, we talked a little bit about adoption, right? So how do you measure the adoption rate and how are your users really adopting to the tool that's been put in place? As Steve talked about it, it's AI is now my colleague, my coworker. How is everybody else around you adopting to that tool and that technology? And what is your adoption rate?
Steve, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I would add on. I completely agree. I think just along with adoption comes potentially shadow AI. And the more folks are using AI outside of the guardrails, so measure what's in the guardrails, but then also measure what's happening outside the guardrails, because that's your indicator of whether or not your strategy, your tactics are really relevant to solving business problems. So the more folks are going to go outside, the less likely it is that what you're bringing to the table and stewarding is working for them. So that's one measure, I think.
I think another too, you think about culture, because you mentioned it earlier, is like your culture shouldn't change or shift significantly, specifically, obviously, in a downward trend by the adoption of the tools and technology. And I think most of us do engagement surveys, cultural surveys, and so forth to measure that.
Definitely. The last question in the lightning round. One human practice that you will not automate and why? Steve, maybe I'll go with you first.
For me, this is leadership. I mentioned it yesterday, but leadership requires judgment, context, empathy. Amy mentioned agility, accountability, especially in moments where there's lots of uncertainty, ambiguity, and or trade-offs need to be understood. AI can help inform leaders, but it can't replace the responsibility that leadership carries for other people and the outcomes for the business.
I couldn't agree more. You cannot replace leadership skills in your environment. That will be a cultural killer, to say the least. And if I want to get really tactical, because everybody always says, but you're broadening that a bit too much there, Amy, I would tell you that the face-to-face interview, whether that be via Zoom or be in person, cannot go away. Absolutely not.
Great answers. As advertised, the lightning round went by quickly, but so did this interview and this podcast. So we're right about at the close, and I have one more question for each of you, and that's, what is one commitment that you would encourage leaders, peers, to make in 2026 to advance humans times machines in a meaningful way?
Okay, so I think I would want leaders to commit to designing AI the same way they design leadership. Intentional, ethical, clear accountabilities. Because if humans don't lead the system deliberately, the system's going to lead humans by default. And I don't mean that in a science fiction way. I just think you allow AI to kind of just lead the way, it's going to drive you in ways that you may or may not want to go. So I think advancing humans and machines together means protecting what makes work human while using technology to expand what we as humans are all capable of.
So I'm going to go really simple on this one. This should have been the lightning round question from my perspective. For the HR professionals listening in, I want you to go have breakfast with your CIO. I want you to sit down and I want you to create a real relationship with your lead technologist. And that seems really simple. Some organizations, I know it may not be as simple as the relationship I've been able to create with Steve. And I know that I'm blessed as a result of that. But it also helps make my life much simpler when it comes to AI technology, because he knows my business, he understands my business, he supports my business, and then also knows what are the gaps and how can we help.
Yeah, it's a wonderful sentiment. And you guys have it easy for breakfast because
do.
you're in South
same
Florida.
City. Yeah.
Well, it's been a really engaging conversation. I really do love the themes of ownership mindset, the powers at the intersection. Steve, you said it, approaching this topic as the steering wheel versus the brakes, just super powerful. So thank you so much, Amy and Steve, for joining us, sharing your perspectives, and Thank you all for listening to us today.
Thanks, Darren.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Capital H. One thing is clear. AI value is not a tech initiative. It is a work design imperative. The organizations that win will intentionally design human and machine collaboration, set clear guardrails, and scale the human edge with discipline. Darren, Amy, and Steve, thank you for sharing how to move from pilots to impact, build trust, and redesign work without sacrificing meaning or safety. Stay tuned for more from Capital H.
This podcast is produced by Deloitte. The views and opinions expressed by podcast speakers and guests are solely their own and do not reflect the opinions of Deloitte. This podcast provides general information only and is not intended to constitute advice or services of any kind. For additional information about Deloitte, please go to deloitte.com/about.